Now, joining me is a true expert on this subject, Scott Pruitt, who's a former Environment Protection Agency administrator. Scott Pruitt. Are you in Oklahoma, Scott Pruitt? I want to ask you about this prairie.
I'm in Oklahoma. I'm in Oklahoma, yes.
All right, so what's the story with this male prairie, whatchamacallit, bird that was fingered for the Endangered Species Act? And if they had actually gone through with it, it would have shut down the entire Permian Basin. What do you think about that?
Yeah,
good idea?
It's been going on for years, Larry. And what's interesting about that, many states, Oklahoma included, Kansas and others, had developed regional plans to increase the population for the lesser prairie chicken. And the federal government stepped in on top of that and said, stop, we're going to enforce this upon the states. And again, to stop projects. So it was hypocritical on behalf of the federal government. States were making progress already without their intervention.
All right, let's go to the heart of these new regs. They're basically wiping the Trump reforms out. You played a role in those Trump reforms when you were at EPA. As you know, it went through the National Economic Council, et cetera, et cetera. This business about cumulative environment impact, direct or indirect environment impact, and the so-called social cost of carbon, Scott Pruitt, this sounds to me like new and onerous rules. This will be more regulations and red tape, not less, and may well stop any new projects. What you think?
Larry, you've hit it well. I mean, when you look at the infrastructure package passed last year, highways, transmission infrastructure, that's going to be halted in light of these new regulations. As you know, our administration came in less than the time frame, but also did something else, Larry. We put ceiling effects in the regulation to say that agencies would not have to go beyond what's required in NEPA. They also took that away with their changes yesterday. They said that agencies can have new requirements outside of the NEPA regulations. So it's substantive and timing, and it's going to cause substantial problem with projects getting done.
What you mean, Scott, outside of NEPA? Give me, for instance.
The ceiling requirements, what we did in our administration, and what the president did, as you know, Larry, is that he put requirements in saying that an agency could not go beyond what's stated in the NEPA regulations. So if there were requirements, the maximum requirements that could be imposed upon a project would be dictated by what was in the NEPA regulations. That's called the ceiling effect. And the Biden administration took those out yesterday and said that an agency can go beyond what's in the NEPA regulations in imposing requirements on projects. So that, you know, the person that you cited earlier about regulatory certainty, that's going to be the opposite of regulatory certainty, because NEPA regulations are spelled out, they're objective, they're measurable. When an agency can go in and go beyond those maximum requirements and set their own without statute and without direction, that's going to create regulatory uncertainty.
So that's really this business. Cumulatively, all the impacts. This is driving me crazy, Scott. You and I may have talked about this on the show a while back, but this social cost of carbon, I mean, you have to go back 100 years, you could go forward 100 years. They're talking about direct, they're talking about indirect. By the time they're all through with it, I would venture to say no new projects will ever pass.
I think, look, I mean, when it takes 10 to 15 years to go through permitting before our changes, and we made the changes, the Trump administration made the changes to set it no more than 2 years, and to do it according to the regulations that have been passed by NEPA, and all that goes out the window, the uncertainty that will occur, Larry. I mean, look, when we left Washington as an administration, we were energy independent. A couple of years later, now we're energy dependent. We're dependent upon those across, you know, that are our foes to import energy and to help Americans with the economy. And gas prices obviously are escalating. And when you look at projects, infrastructure, that's the heart of, you know, highway infrastructure, transmission infrastructure. These changes, Larry, are going to create prolonged efforts of permitting that will make sure those projects never occur.
That's what I'm thinking. And you know what, Scott? This is going to affect pipelines for sure. It's going to affect electric generation, utilities, things of that sort. It seems to me it's right here. They're going to run these environmental reviews, cumulative reviews, direct and indirect reviews, social cost of carbon reviews. Nobody's going to be able to pass that. I mean, this is a greenie's dream, but it's an economic and jobs nightmare. I mean, aren't we going to lose construction, hard hat, blue-collar jobs? I mean, isn't that going to go up in smoke?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Larry, if I might add too, when you look at the need that we have with what's going on in Ukraine and the need for Europe to have alternative energy and LNG, the president today on a different matter could suspend permitting, allowing us to enhance our liquefaction capacity to liquefy natural gas and export that energy to meet Europe's needs. He could do that overnight with his national security authority. So not only is he going backwards on permitting with respect to infrastructure, he's not going on the offense to suspend permitting to allow liquefaction capacity to be increased in Louisiana and Texas to export LNG across the ocean to deal with the need of Europe in light of what's going on in Ukraine. So the administration is just simply going backwards on many issues and then trying to solve problems like expanding access to the petroleum reserve. That's not going to solve the problem. He needs to fix the problem by making sure that we don't go backwards on permitting and then make sure that we can export LNG by suspending permitting with respect to liquefaction.
Yeah, you know, Rick Perry said a while back, a couple weeks on the show, on the LNG exports, Scott, one of the wonderful things we could do to help climate would be to export tons and tons of LNG to, let's say, India or China or places like that that are using coal, which does throw off a lot more emissions. I mean, that gas is essentially clean burning. We would do more to lower world emissions by exporting more in LNG. But you can't do that without pipelines. You can't do that without drilling, right? Do I have this right? And this stuff, here's another one. Let me ask you this. EPA alumnus, you ran EPA for a couple of years. Look, they're talking about something called planned versus unplanned projects. It's in the fine print. Well, what the hell's an unplanned project? What if you're in a community that's growing, like a red state, and it's growing by leaps and bounds, okay? What if you're up in the Dakotas? They've had a terrific run of it. Texas and Florida have had terrific. If you didn't give them a blueprint, I don't know, a few years ago, you can't do it because it wasn't planned. It was any unplanned, i.e. new projects are no good. I mean, how can that be?
It can't. I mean, it creates the regulatory uncertainty that makes sure that we have challenges in projects getting approved. I mean, at the end of the day, permitting historically has been used, as you know, Larry, by the environmental left to stop projects, not to inform decisions, but to stop projects. Mm-hmm. And that's not the purpose of the permitting under NEPA. NEPA is simply a requirement upon agencies to inform themselves as they make decisions on infrastructure, transmission infrastructure, and the rest. It should not be used in an abusive fashion. And it's being used in an abusive fashion. Historically, it was fixed in the Trump administration, and now it's unfixed. We've gone backwards, and the administration is doing all that they can to make sure that these projects don't go forward for America.
I'm afraid you're right. Scott Pruitt, appreciate it, sir. Thank you very much. Talk soon.